not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. This is added to mark the depth of their corruption. For when men are not entirely abandoned to sin, although they allow of it in their own circumstances and practice, yet they condemn it in their general notions and in the practice of others, because then it is not connected with their own interest and self-love. But when human corruption has arrived at its height, men not only commit sins, but approve of them in those who commit them. While this was strictly applicable to the whole body of the people, it was chargeable in the highest degree on the leaders and philosophers, who, having more light than the others, treated in their schools some of those things as crimes of which they were not only guilty themselves, but the commission of which they encouraged by their connivance, especially in the abominable rites practiced in the worship of their gods. By these conclusive proofs, Paul substantiates his charge in verse 18 against the whole Gentile world, first of ungodliness, and then of unrighteousness as its consequence, against which the wrath of God is revealed. It should also be observed that, as in another place, Titus 2:12, he divides Christian holiness into three parts, namely, sobriety, righteousness, and godliness. In the same way, in this chapter, he classes pagan depravity under three heads. The first is their ungodliness, namely that they have not glorified God, that they have changed his glory into images made like to corruptible creatures, that they have changed his truth into a lie, which is opposed to godliness. The second is intemperance. God had delivered them up to uncleanness and vile affections which are opposed to sobriety. The third is unrighteousness, and all the other vices noted in the last verses, which are opposed to righteousness. It is impossible to add anything to the view here given of the reign of corruption among the heathens, even the most celebrated and civilized, which is fully attested by their own historians. Nothing can be more horrible than this representation of their state. And as the picture is drawn by the Spirit of God, who is acquainted not only with the outward actions, but with the secret motives of men, no Christian can suppose that it is exaggerated. The apostle then had good reason to conclude in the sequel that justification by works is impossible, and that in no other way can it be obtained but by grace. From the whole, we see how terrible to his posterity have been the consequences of the sin of the first man, and, on the other hand, how glorious in the plan of redemption is the grace of God by his Son. Chapter 2. In the preceding chapter, the apostle had described the state of the idolatrous pagans, whom he had proved to be under the just condemnation of God. He now passes to that of the Jews, who, while they rejected the righteousness of God to which the law and the prophets bore witness, looked for salvation from their relation to Abraham, from their exclusive privileges as a nation, and from their observance of the law. In this and the two following chapters, Paul combats these deeply rooted prejudices, and is thus furnished with an opportunity of clearly unfolding the doctrine of the gospel, and of proving that it alone is the power of God unto salvation. In the first part of this chapter, to the 24th verse, he shows that the just judgment of God must be the same against the Jews as against the Gentiles, since the Jews are equally sinners. In the second part, from the beginning of the 25th verse to the end, he proves that the external advantages which the Jews had enjoyed were insufficient to ward off this judgment. From his language at the commencement of this chapter in respect to that judgment which the Jews were accustomed to pass on the other nations, and to which he reverts in the 17th verse, it is evident that through the whole of it he is addressing the Jews, and not referring, as many suppose, to the heathen philosophers or magistrates.